if I'm the operator whose hair's on fire and has a million and one things to do, now instead of having to, pay full time for that, I can have the person come in, they're trained, they don't require training, they don't require benefits.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Brandon Bobart. Brandon, thanks for taking time. How you doing today?
Yeah, no, thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Doing well, rocking and rolling here this week and excited to have a nice discussion.
Excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to talk to Brandon and really excited to just learn as much as I can about marketing and fractional marketers and this whole game that's out there right now. How are you, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think one of my favorite parts about marketing that we're going to get into today is the feel that some companies are expecting one person to be maybe a magician, some to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, then to execute, then to receive the data, and then to align all the objectives with the organization. And I think that is way too much for a single individual. And I think, especially given the challenges of cannabis today, you need more than just an individual, and you need to have an understanding of a framework. So I think before we dive into all the fun parts, which I am excited to, Brandon, we got to put you on the map. A little East Coast, West Coast battle. Where are your loyalty lies?
Yeah, so I'm based here in the East Coast. I'm near Charlotte, North Carolina. Lived in the South most of my life. I always get funny reactions when I tell people in the cannabis industry that I live in the South. They'll say things like, how are you in the cannabis industry? Don't y'all have some rules and regulations against that? But we've been blessed. We've worked in most legal markets at this point, which I think gives us a really unique perspective. You've definitely got some like state experts and people who really know that particular market. But given our reach, we've really had a nice kind of global 30,000 foot view onto what's going on in different markets. And I think that really helps us bring a holistic perspective when we work with operators, especially in the newer markets, as we're watching states like Ohio and Kentucky, kind of roll into different growth periods. We're really able to bring a nice lens to those clients.
Yeah, I love that. So let's start with fractional marketing. For those who are just unfamiliar, can you give us kind of like a whole high level overview of what fractional marketing is and then kind of how it applies to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely a newer term, right? And I think as marketers tend to do, they like to slap new fancy words on things that maybe have been around longer than we want to pretend. But fractional marketing to me is bringing on subject matter experts to work with small business owners in a piece, right? So it's not full time. And I think the difference in fractional marketing versus, say, like a consultant is we really become embedded in the team. So we're not just sitting on the sideline saying, hey, it'd be really cool if you did this and be great if you did that. We really become a part of the team. So that could be weekly, daily, hey, this thing came up. We're going to jump right in and really support. And fractional for us really allows us to bring a variety of skill sets to an operator's team where a lot of them don't have either the resources, the time, the know-how to, hire diligently for all the nuanced roles. Just take like a blog, for example, a simple thing that many companies are doing as a marketing strategy. That's really 4 or 5 different people, right? You've got a keyword researcher, a copywriter, a web developer, a graphic designer. There's a lot of different pieces to that puzzle. And often they've kind of jammed that into like one line item for their marketing director, who's then trying to do it okay because they're talented and they're smart and they got hustle, but it's never going to be the best use of their time and it's never going to be the best output.
Why do you think the cannabis industry is specifically going to benefit from fractional marketers? Is it just from the company size currently, right? Like it's a very fragmented market. You don't have these massive like Fortune 500 companies that can afford a full marketing team. You think that's why the cannabis industry is going to benefit so much from this kind of model?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of it does have to do with budget and resources, right? I mean, in a perfect world, I think having some of those assets full time on the team would be great. But the reality is like if you consider, like a single state dispensary who has a handful of locations, they don't really need a full-time graphic designer. You could probably crank out all the graphic design work you need in a day, a half day, depending on the depth of that. And then what starts to happen is, if I'm the operator whose hair's on fire and has a million and one things to do, now instead of having to, pay full time for that, I can have the person come in, they're trained, They don't require training. They don't require benefits. There's no W-2 that you have to worry about. So you're not having to pay that tax and FICA on top of the rate. There's no press release you have to put out when, oh, we got to let them go because this quarter didn't go as well as we anticipated. So I think it really gives them a lot of flexibility within the way they structure their organization to pivot. And what we're able to do with teams, like we're working with an Ohio group right now, they're going to come online. They're going to need a certain set of tasks for phase one. It's going to be branding. It's going to be website. It's going to be foundation. We can execute that first phase and then seamlessly pivot to, say, top of funnel, loyalty program, retention programs, website management without having to start back from square one. And I think where we differ for maybe some of the more traditional marketing agencies is we can make that fluid pivot between the phases of that growth without then having the operator having to go back to square one, get a new team, go back to sales meetings, and really train another team to get acquainted with who they are and what they stand for and what they're trying to accomplish.
How complicated is the alignment of the objectives and, let's say, your understanding of saying this team is trying to take 2 steps to the right and then 4 steps forward when really they should be focusing on the left? How complicated is that with your understanding of how the dynamics are and like the balance between what they think their needs are?
I think it depends on which part of the cannabis industry we're talking about. We've worked with some multi-state brands, for example. That gets pretty complicated because you've got a lot of different markets, and what marketing strategy applies in Arizona is definitely not going to move the needle in Massachusetts. And you've got a lot of stakeholders you have to account for within those different markets, and they usually have kind of more spread out teams. So, for that and for really any process, we really always start with an audit. We want to understand what are the KPIs and North Star metrics that the operator cares most about outside revenue that we can hang our hat on. I think business owners want another blog or a social post like a hole in the head. They don't need a blog. They don't need a social post. They need results. They need outcomes. And so if you can align early and often on what those are and really focus more on delivering a KPI versus a basket of tasks, right? You go to a lot of marketing firms. It's like, we're going to give you 3 posts and 4 blogs and it's like, great, but what does that do for me? So that process typically is a paid process for us, where we want to make sure that there's buy-in on the operator's side. We don't just go out and give away free strategy because we've been burned so many times. So we start with some sort of paid audit, and we really spend the time to get to know the team. We interview stakeholders. We talk to the operators. We talk to key executives or marketing directors or sales teams if they're on the B2B side to really understand what do they do, what's their tech stack, what are their tasks. And that usually takes 30 to 45 days. And from that, then we can really align on what we're actually trying to influence. And then I can make a suggestion and say, hey, if these are the things we're trying to influence, here's the team that I would bring to the table. And what I think I've done that's a little unique is I'm able to bring a budget variability to it, because I don't just have one team that's full-time that works for me. I've got a lot of freelancers, contractors, and other companies. So if you say, hey, we really need organic search improvement, I can say, hey, I've got the fine bottle of wine version here that's X, and I've got the $2 chuck down here and it's Y, right? So I can give them a bit of variability within that, which I think for operators who have slim margins and are still under the constraints of 280E, I think that really is a powerful unlock for a lot of them.
How much of that is matchmaking? Is there like a certain aspect of it where you just, from your experience, know that, hey, this freelancer is going to vibe with this individual at this organization from our audit, and regardless of cost, I'm going to try to push them there because I know that it's just going to be successful? Like, how much of that is like that matchmaking from like a cultural standpoint, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think first, it is aligning on budget, right? I mean, there's just some folks that can't afford a particular service, so we want to filter that first. And then I think it's, do I have a copywriter in a specific market? If I've got a Michigan client and they need content, it would be really great if I brought in a local subject matter expert to write that content versus just someone who lives in California and kind of knows the cannabis industry or knows that part of the industry really well. So I try to always look at what's going to be most efficient and give them the best value for that piece. And then some of it is really like a general contractor, right? Where I'm really trying to find the best sub, if you will, for a particular project. And our role is really making sure that they deliver, making sure they show up on time, they clean up after they leave, all those kind of things that I think a general contractor does, and really align with them on that level.
I want to go back to what you said before, which is like not revenue generating and not just task based, because there has to be some sort of key KPI. Because I could imagine some people come to you and say, "Hey, Brandon, like we want to do a blog post so that we can get more sales." And you're like, "Yeah, that would be great if we could attribute blog posts to sales," but that's likely not the case. So take us through the process of like what would be a KPI that normally goes on and how you would structure that with some of the tasks so that people understand kind of how the fit dynamic works.
Yeah. So, if we're looking at an operator, for example, typically the metrics that matter will be, buckets, right? So we'll look at, conversion source and conversion revenue. So once we get GA4 and Google Search Console set up, we can really start to understand like which one of those channels is driving online revenue for your retail location. So we can break it down by social, by email, by organic search, by paid media. So being able to come up first with a baseline, and frankly, a lot of folks, they don't even have it set up, right? We'll come in and it's like GA4, I still got Google Universal, or GA4, I don't know what that is, right? So sometimes, they're all in different places. You get really seasoned multi-state operators that they got it dialed in, and you get your more mom and pops where that's still a work in progress. And so it's a little unique, but we'll come in, we first establish baseline, and then those are what we want to influence moving forward. And then each one of those buckets kind of has like leading indicators. So, if we're looking at SEO, it's clicks, it's impressions, it's, saturation of a particular keyword, it's number of keywords in a top 3 position, a top 5 position, it's heat maps, right? We use those leading indicators to kind of move up to the ones that really matter, which are revenue. If you go to website, it's things like conversion rate, it's time on page, it's, so those are, again, leading indicators. If we can start influencing those positively, we know that eventually the revenue that comes through that particular channel will improve. Loyalty, it's clicks, it's open rate, it's number of returning customers, it's time to visits or time between visits, right? So then we try to break each one of those out into like sub KPIs that influence the North Star KPI, which is the revenue that comes from that particular channel. And you could extrapolate that out to other pieces of the puzzle, paid media, social media, PR, right? And kind of beyond.
How do you balance scope creep, the time from like a project standpoint? I can imagine, Brandon, some people get a little taste and they're like, "Oh, this is awesome, it's working. How about you do some of this?" And you're like, "Well, that's kind of outside of scope." How do you balance those to make it fair for both sides?
Yeah, it happens a lot. And I don't think everyone really realizes, they say, "Oh, well, just change this website," or just, one more round of edits, Brandon. How hard can it be? So we often find that getting them in the weeds with us does really help that. So instead of me just saying, "Hey, business owner, here's your update, here's your doc, here's whatever the thing you paid for," we try to get them in the project management system with us. So we're working together. They can see the labor behind it. And I think that helps illuminate it for some people, because then they're like, "Shit, this is actually a fair amount of work." And I look at it too as like, what's the lifetime value of that client for us? If they're going to be someone that we can grow with and they can become a 6-figure client, I'm willing to go above and beyond, and I will take some of those things on the chin, because I just know that some months I'll win and some months they're going to win, right? And if I can ride that roller coaster with them, I'd much rather keep the client I have than go find another one, because that marriage and get to know each other process, it's tough. And, once we know that they're going to be a good lifetime client, we like working with them, but if it comes up, we try to, prescribe and say, "Hey, like, look, this is a little outside. We could either add a little bit of cash. We could, maybe take these tasks off the plate this month." We really try to be flexible and avoid just this like rigid, "Hey, this is the XYZ that we agreed on and we can't deviate from that." Because I come to this as a business owner first. I own multiple businesses. I don't just come at this as like a marketing agency hat that I'm trying to hit like an efficiency ratio and some tracking program that I have set up. So I think I approach it a little bit differently than maybe others do.
When you're getting them in the weeds with you, is there a balancing act to not just kind of giving away all of your secret sauce in terms of how your team and everything functions? Do you get in situations where like they're trying to like put an individual with you that is essentially you're just training them? Like, how do you kind of balance those efforts with that relationship?
Well, sometimes it's clear that that is the goal. Like, we just started working with a Canadian manufacturing group, and they basically said, "Hey, like, we want to run 12 to 18 months, but by the end of this engagement, we want to have the ability to hire internally." And if that's the goal with the business owner from the outset, that's fine. Fractional doesn't always mean forever. it's maybe a bridge to a place where you can hire full time, because I think in many cases it's great to have full-time people that they live, breathe, like eat your company. And we're never going to get that level of involvement, right? And so for operators who are trying to make every dollar go as far as they can, sometimes that's fine. And I'm also of the belief, like I was an educator in a former life. And if you train people and empower people, they're going to be more successful business owners, right? And far be it for me to try to hold the knowledge purse just so I can make a buck. I mean, there are things that I would say are like proprietary. The reality is like access to this information is out there. I mean, there's systems and SOPs that we've developed, but a lot of what we learn from people on LinkedIn or YouTube or, courses that are put out there. So I think access to information now is much different than maybe it was before. And I would much prefer them to see us as a equal partner. And we're getting to this goal together versus, hey, I'm going to sit over here and hold the keys to the things and only give what you pay for.
I think that's where it really demonstrates the critical importance of the fractional marketer, is that your team can come in to a situation that maybe doesn't even exist and build it from the ground up so that someone else who is a skilled person can come in at that point and fly, versus the other aspect, which is it's a startup, it's super fast. You hire somebody for a good salary they think is a great marketer, and they come in for the first time and they're like, there's no foundation here. There's no system. There's no principles. I got to do everything myself. And it's super overwhelming because I'm assuming that CEO or executive who's making that first hire from a CMO is expecting results super fast. And this person's like, hey, like we got to put the studs in the ground. We got to lay a foundation. That person's like, I need you putting ads out there ASAP. Is that kind of the under-recognized value from a fractional marketer standpoint, the ability to come in and create no matter what the situation currently is?
Yeah, I think if you consider all the buckets that would be like executive lanes, revenue, sales, ops, human resources, so on and so forth, marketing is probably one of the most misunderstood, where a lot of CEOs really don't get the distinction between, all the micro tasks and micro skill sets that are truly required. And so I think I can really come in where maybe like a junior or mid-level hire would struggle. I can communicate, I think, at a level with the CEO or executive team that allows them to see, hey, like you're actually skipping over some really critical steps. And I can sit down with them and think in I can think in days, but I can also think in years. And I think that's really important for someone early on with a founder CEO type, because I know you want to fly. I know you want to hit these massive goals. So let's break that down into like digestible chunks. And let's really show you how we get there and the path to that. And sometimes that's better received than others. Like it really does depend on the executive, their willingness to listen. You've definitely got some folks that don't, they think they know everything and they kind of take your advice and hear you, but then do something else. So you can't fix that necessarily. And that's why we do typically like short-term contracts. We're vetting them in many ways as much as they're vetting us. I don't get people to sign 12-month contracts for a variety of reasons. One, I hate being stuck in a contract I don't want to be in. And two, if it's not a good relationship, then we're very involved with them. It's high touch. We talk to them daily, weekly, Slack, and if it's a like, oh God, I don't want to talk to that person moment every time, it's not worth the money, not even close.
What are some of those microservices? People may not be familiar with marketing, just kind of level that you are. So can you give us an example, some of those microservices that just might be misunderstood?
Yeah, I mean, I think SEO is one of the most commonly misunderstood ones, right? Like everyone knows they want to rank number one, but they really don't know what's required to get there. And I always tell people, number one, like no one knows the algorithm. If anyone's out there telling you like, oh, I got, 3 weeks and you're number one in Google, or 3 months, like bullshit, that's a load of crap. Like there's no way they can guarantee you anything. Google doesn't publish the algorithm. They actually lie publicly about what's in the algorithm. That's been proven in the last quarter. So within that bucket, you've got link building, right? That's a team. You've got someone to do outreach. You've got someone to do the management of it. You've got someone to do the research. You've then got someone who's got to write the guest post or create the content that's going to be anchored on another site. So that's 4 to 6 different people. None of them are the same, like personality wise, background, skill sets. They couldn't be more different from each other, right? And that's one part of SEO. Then you got on-page SEO. So what's actually on the website itself? You need a copywriter, you need a developer, you need a designer, you need a little micro team there. And you talk about blogging, you get your own other micro team. That really could be 10 to 12 different people. And there's no way you as a cannabis operator who's running a multi-state dispensary or doing an asset-light brand who's in 12 markets is really going to want to manage, not even manage, but hire, vet, you know, I always use the general contractor analogy. If you're building a home, you would never go out and interview plumbers, electricians, roofers, people to do your flooring, because you wouldn't have the slightest idea of what even to ask them. You know, what do you show up in an interview and ask the flooring person? I have no idea. Now, that's why you hire a general contractor. Do they actually do the work? No. But are they actually managing it so that you don't have to end up paying for something twice? That's what you really want to avoid. You don't want to pay for brand work or website stuff twice. And if we can help you, you know, cut the time down to success, reduce wasted costs, I think we're adding a value. And so that's just, you know, one bucket of marketing. You could do paid, you could talk websites, you could talk social media, and I can show you a team for each one of those buckets.
That's the fun part of marketing that most people don't ever really want to talk about, right? They just assume it's a single bullet and they can just fire. And it's like, hey, I hired Brian. He's a marketer. He should be able to do A through Z.
Yeah. Yep. You see it all the time. You walk into an organization, you know, these are larger ones, and you go into like the HR department. They've got a payroll specialist. They've got a human resource person. They've got an onboarding person. I mean, they've got all these micro tasks broken up. And then they're like, well, there's Susie. She's our marketing team. And you're like, I don't think Susie's going to be able to do all those things that you really want. But, you know, and I think it just comes back to misunderstanding it. And I think it's that those other parts haven't changed as much in the last 10 years as marketing has, right? Digital's been hot for decades, but just what, you know, is digital marketing continues to evolve. Even as a marketer, I struggle with keeping up. Like, you know, Clay is a really hot thing in digital marketing right now. And everyone's using Clay to enrich data and build waterfalls and create automated sequences and identify website visitors that put them in funnels. That didn't exist 6 months ago, right? And if you're not like really on it, you're like, Clay, I don't even know what that is. And we see that a lot. And, you know, you got people that are still stuck with a 2014 playbook, you know? And so I think that's part of the challenge.
One thing I'm going to push back on you is Susie. She can't be a team if she's a single individual.
Well, it's the classic, I'm a marketing director and I have no one to direct scenario, where I see that title thrown around a lot. And the marketing director is doing the field marketing. They're doing the digital marketing. Like, you know, they're doing the product marketing on the B2B side. Like, there's so many things I see them thrown into. And yeah, you're right. It's not a team. It's an island.
Right. It's a single individual. So yeah. I think talk to us about the importance of, let's say, a website. I think everyone's familiar with the website, but from a digital standpoint, how critical is it to have, let's say, your public standpoint from it's your digital store. It's the aspect that when people walk in for the first time, maybe they're not in your physical store yet, they're in their digital store. Take us through that experience and how critical something like that is. Because we've had some companies who say, hey, I don't really need a website because people don't really visit it. Like, talk us how important that is and some of the aspects people might not be thinking about the importance of it.
Yeah, no, I think you got to think about a website and like where you are, because I've touched on several different verticals today, right? Like, if you're a B2B consultant, for example, like I've seen B2B consultants do, you know, like there's this guy I follow on LinkedIn. He's social sold for years. He just launched like a cohort, no website. He's doing 50 signups a month, $1,000 a sign up, clearing 50K every single month. The dude has no website, right? So I think there's like sometimes an overinvestment in it early on. And I think, you know, some people, especially B2B, will spend a lot of money on a logo and a fancy website before they even know their messaging or who their persona is. And there's a lot of wasted time, energy, money there. So I think in some scenarios, you can kind of crawl, walk, run until you get to like a real investment. If you're a dispensary, if you're selling something online, if you're like a retail customer facing type business, it's so much more critical. And it's something you really got to nail early on. The site needs to be easy to use. You know, think of a dispensary. Most people are on their mobile phone. If it doesn't load quick, if it's not super easy to navigate to shop, if it's not crystal clear on how to check out, like people are conditioned to have an Amazon-like experience, right? That's for good, for bad, you know, it is what it is. So the more you can do to emulate that, it's like when you walk into a store and you've been in that store before, you know where to go, you know, and you don't have to like, well, where's this aisle? That's what causes people to bounce off the site. And if you're a retailer, that's what you want to create is a really familiar scenario where I can go to your site, I can quickly add items to my basket, I can check out in a couple clicks. We'll do audits of dispensary sites and we'll count the number of clicks from loading to checkout. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 15. You're losing people every step of the way. And so I think, again, like everyone's got a little bit different of a how and a why, but the core tenets of a good website are the same. It's easy to use, it's quick loading, easy to navigate. It looks nice. I think sometimes people overemphasize design. I think design is great, but they often skip the copy part, and I think that's where you really have to spend a little bit of time and energy on creating something. And then just understanding too that it's not a set and forget, right? You can't just build it and then you're good forever. You need to monitor it. You need to understand how people are using it. You need to use analytics and tools to understand where people are falling off in your funnel, where are they clicking, so there's a variety of things in there.
Then you need to create an email engagement off that. So if people take certain steps, you want to make sure that they come back, because it turns out not everyone goes to a website and buys immediately. Maybe those individuals want to, and they're very interested, but maybe their child's crying or they have to leave and they want to be re-engaged with. And I think those are the elements sometimes people forget, where it's like, exactly like you said today, it's like, it's not a single source. It's not just like set it and forget it. You have to build the foundation. Then you have to continually connect the tools to ensure that it's a smooth, efficient transition.
Totally. Yep. And, you need a variety of calls to action. There's the direct buy, but you need a softer call to action because some people will stop by, they'll poke around, they're price shopping, whatever you want to call it. And so if you can capture that, move them to an owned asset, which is like your email list, then there's value to that, and then we'll compound over time.
Yeah, and that's another individual you didn't name before.
At what point in a small business do they need to kind of take these steps and start this investment process into analyzing and keeping track of all these metrics within their website portfolio, right? Is it like, I hit 10 dispensaries, I now need to be deep into these data analytics to kind of drive more growth within the digital aspect? Like, is there a right place, or is there even a right answer to that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a right place. I mean, I think the sooner you start, the better, because it's then easier to measure a baseline and measure growth. Obviously, the complexity changes. If I've got 10 dispensaries versus one, I've got a lot more data analysis. I've got a lot more kind of nuance to consider. What's the geography of the store? Who's visiting the store? Like, we just did a visit up to Michigan, and we saw a border town, and then we kind of saw what their traffic's like. Insane. People coming through every minute. People are coming right over from the Ohio, border. And then you go up an hour, the store does, 20% of the revenue. The traffic's way different. So their analytics are going to look different. And I think that's really important to understand, is the context of the store and, what that particular company is trying to accomplish. And I think that the sooner you start, the easier it is to scale. If I'm, wait till I've got a bunch of stores and I'm trying to grow, and then we loop in the analytics setup, and then we start to try to track it. You got to go backwards. And I find going backwards is a lot harder than just setting it up from the get-go and analyzing it, because then it becomes part of your norm, part of your workflow, where then if I'm going back and trying to add it, it feels overwhelming. So I think that's important. And then, how are you tracking all that data and storing it, right? We live in like dashboard heaven. There's just like, executives love dashboards, and they have 10, 15, 20 dashboards. And so how do you get that in one spot? And so we use tools like DataBox as a great example, where really, ironically, it's a dashboard for your dashboards, which is kind of funny, but they basically aggregate all your dashboards into one. So instead of logging into 15 places, now you can pull it into one. You can set your goals. You can do your forecasting. And those kind of hacks are sometimes what the owner needs to figure out to help it not feel so overwhelming and disparate and siloed.
I can only imagine the conversation when you have with these people, when you help them institute these dashboards and let them get some visibility into their business before they're probably flying completely blind. They probably have an understanding of how it looks and feels, but probably don't have a really strong sense from a data standpoint of how they're doing and if things are going the right way or the wrong way.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, I think flying blind is a great way to explain it. I mean, I do a lot of work with different industries, and you see your more traditional SaaS industries and some of these more evolved direct-to-consumer industries. And, again, I'm generalizing, but you'll walk in with a CEO of one of those companies. They've got their spreadsheets, they got their KPIs, like everything's tracked. And then you come into cannabis. And again, like, I think there's just a gap there sometimes. And it's hard to, it's that old adage of like, what doesn't get measured doesn't get improved. And there's so much stuff that goes on in a, traditional retail environment. Like, so many people think, oh, I'm just going to open a dispensary and sell weed. It's like, no, you're not. You own a retail location. You're in the CPG business. Like, do you really have any sense of how much that involves? And some of them do, and some of them don't, And I think and I don't come from a place of judgment. I want to educate them, obviously, and I want to help them understand it. But there is an uphill battle sometimes with different operators, because that's not a part of their plan. And so you're trying to get them to add things to their plate when they're already a swamp. They're already busy. They're already trying to do, a bunch of different things. So yeah, it's interesting.
Does market maturity affect that dynamic that you're just describing significantly? Like, you just mentioned a potential client in Ohio, right, that you were talking about, versus let's compare it to someone who's bringing a dispensary online in, say, California or Colorado or Oregon, right? One of the more mature markets. Do you tend to have that? Does that interaction tend to be more similar to like the other industries you're describing from a professionalism standpoint, where the individual in California from a mature market standpoint is kind of used to looking at all this data and is just looking for someone to come in and help build the infrastructure versus an individual in a new market just is completely oblivious to the stuff they don't know?
I definitely think that's a generality that you could say. Yeah, I think in more mature markets, they've definitely had to evolve. They've had the trial and error. They've learned. And if they're still in the game in California, Oregon, Colorado, some of those places you mentioned, they're obviously a strong operator, right? They've got some sense of business. They've probably pivoted 15 times, right? So I think that's a generalization. I think the differences in those more mature markets are like we come in and they're asking about like profitability. How do we really increase margins? How do we really increase return customers, right? So it's a different ask versus maybe a newer market. Like, the conversations I'm having with folks in Kentucky, very, very different. It's how do we get people through the door? What's a marketing plan? What data should I track? Like it's just a very different place. But that's kind of the fun of it all because, you can come in with your perspective and you can see 0 to 10 years from some of the experiences we've had in the more mature markets that have been around that long. And you can help apply that in these new markets and save them a lot of headache and time and really make suggestions that I think move the needle. And it's kind of fun. I like the different problems, right? I mean, every problem has a different solution. And I think it's the fun for us is identifying them, coming up with a solution that works, that fits their budget and moving them forward.
Do you have more fun on like the newer projects or like the kind of late stage kind of projects?
There's definitely a burden and a weight you feel in some of the more mature markets sometimes. Like, I don't want to use the word jaded, but they definitely, some of them are a little like, frustrated. Yeah. So, but then you get the like Kentucky operator that's opening their first dispensary. And like, I mean, we did one in
so excited.
We did one in Mississippi with a husband and wife. They both quit their full-time jobs to open a dispensary. They were actually one of the first dispensaries in Mississippi to sell legal product. And just like the giddiness of all of that is fun and it catches on, like you can feel it. So I definitely like that part. And, then they really want to be in the community and you see them open their doors for the first time and like how powerful that is for them on like a personal level. That's really fun to be a part of. And, it's cool because you can kind of see that in all these different markets. I mean, we're down in the South, so we got a wide ocean ahead of us here in terms of markets that are still yet to be legalized. And we're really excited about that opportunity because we can help bring that experience and, save some of that headache and hopefully create a system that, benefits them and are profitable.
One of the fun aspects of being in the cannabis industry is there are unique challenges, and for social media, there are a few for cannabis. So how do you balance those? And can you share, for anyone who might be not familiar, some of the restrictions or challenges with doing marketing on social media?
Listen, like Instagram and Meta, they're not your buddy, right? They're not here. They don't care. They're pretty awful to deal with. You can't talk about consuming products. You really can't talk about selling products. You really got to think about it as a lifestyle play. Like, what can I come in? I think Wild's done a great job with this, right? Like really tapping into what your consumers do outside cannabis. It can't just be, we got this new 43% THC strain that's going to knock your socks off and the terpenes are through the roof. Like that's an ingredient company. It's not a brand, right? And I won't even get into like the inflated THC thing because that's been talked to death. But I think there's just a misnomer on what social media really is. And I think the one thing a lot of like retailers and probably some brands miss is it's social media. If you're not being social on social media and starting a conversation with similar businesses, your customers, etc., you can post all you want. You can put the coolest graphics up there. You can fun videos. It's not going to become something that people attach to, right? I mean, you look at why TikTok is so powerful. It's raw. It's authentic. It's getting rid of that like curated fake version that I think Instagram feeds have kind of put up for years and really breaking down, edutainment. Like I'm going to entertain you. I'm going to teach you something. So how do you do that in a way where, it is certainly kind of hands tied behind your back in some ways. And I think too, the part of it is cannabis has some haters in it. Like you see these accounts that get, pulled down and restricted. So much of that, in my humble opinion, comes from people getting jealous and people are reporting other profiles and being very, like, it's just a fun, or not fun, it's not what I meant to say. It's like a interesting dynamic where, you think about cannabis and the legacy days and where we came from, and people were so like, we're all in this together, we're all one plant, and then you get out into the, capitalism side of it, and people are like, fuck that. Like, I'm going to report you. I don't like your, fact you're like, it's just interesting. Like, why? And you see that on LinkedIn. You see so much like animosity between people. And I just don't understand that. It really has never made any sense to me.
I know exactly who you're referring to, and there are a few people out there. I think they always enjoy rainy days, and nothing will ever be good enough for them. They just want it to rain every single day for the rest of their life. But one of the things I did want to ask you about, 100%. One of the things I did want to ask you about was like emulating other brands. I think exactly like you said, cannabis can be a lifestyle brand. So I think one of the creative ways that I think brands can take advantage of this is to see other brands that are doing a good job and kind of bring that sort of energy to life and kind of replicating that. Are there any cannabis brands that right now you're thinking is doing a really good job? I know you mentioned Wild, but are there any ones out there else you can give a shout out and say like, hey, these guys are crushing. I think they're really doing a good job.
Yeah, I mean, like, we love Aero Brands. I mean, we've worked with them. We think they do a great job in just bringing out a lifestyle. We also work with a group called Black Buddha Cannabis, which is a smaller asset light brand. Roz McCarthy founded them. She founded Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And she's really tried to bring in a perspective and a point of view that I think is needed in the industry, like really aligning with who the consumers are, what they care about, and giving them a product that they can, feel proud about. So I think those two, off the top of my head, are doing a good job in engaging their consumers.
What are some marketing items that are companies are not currently doing that you think that they should be considering?
I think sometimes it's, digital is great, but I think everyone got really sucked into this vacuum of everything needs to be measured and attributed. And, there's something to be said about good old fashioned grassroots marketing and some more like old school methodologies, right? Like community building, like really aligning with other local businesses and building partnerships and collaborating on content and participating in their community activations and being present in the schools and the third places that exist in your community as an operator goes a long way. And I think sometimes people think like I can just run some ads and do some social posts and, offer the lowest price and boom, I'm, top line heaven. And I think that's missing the mark. And I think you also miss a lot of the joy that comes with small business ownership. Like if you're just digital and driving ads and doing the things that can be measured and tracked and clicked, I think sometimes you miss out on that connection. And I think in today's world, we need the connection more than ever. We're more connected, yet less connected than I think we've ever been historically. And then I think, I'm seeing with brands in cannabis and outside cannabis, like things like direct mail and things like, sending letters and gifts, and those things work. And because, I forget the stat exactly, so I won't even make it up, but just the number of ads people see on a given day digitally is through the roof. And so if you're not really going to hit them over the head with something amazing, creative, unique, the likelihood that it actually resonates is pretty low. And so you can really differentiate yourself by doing some of those other things I mentioned, standing out in a more, tangible, concrete, less digital way. And I think you'll find a little bit more joy in the journey and hopefully a little more success.
I think that's perfectly said. And I think direct mail is absolutely back. I think that is so underrated right now. And to give you an example, I got a direct mail for THC to buy online. And I had 5 people that I know said something to me about how awesome it was that they could get this. And I'm thinking to myself, how many ads have you missed? Probably roughly the same product that you've never even seen. And this one you are excited as hell about to tell me and then to go visit them. So 100% back, direct mail.
Yep, I agree. Totally.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
Questions I wish more people asked you. I think realistically, like what can be accomplished in a given time period. I think a lot of people over assume and over anticipate what can happen in 30 days or 60 days when it comes to marketing. I mean, the things you do today are going to impact your top line and bottom line 90, 120, even further down the line in terms of days out. So what I do today is not going to make an impact to your site, tomorrow. So they just got to have like proper expectations. And I think a lot of that comes with, and frankly, these are the folks we try to avoid, where they think they can hire a firm and save their business, right? And so we don't want to position ourselves as saviors. If you've got a broken product, a broken leadership team, like hiring someone for a few grand a month is not going to fix that. In the South, we say, bless your heart. You know what I mean? So I really just think that that's something I wish people really dug into more, was what's a realistic expectation by hiring a contractor? It could be us. It could be any other sort of, consultant, contractor, whatever. Like, so I think proper expectations. And I think, a lot of people don't ask what we need from them. Like, they'll ask what you're going to do for me. But I don't think they also understand that just because you hire someone externally, that doesn't mean that you can just forget about it. It does actually mean that you're probably going to have to invest more time into it, because we're not you. We don't live in that seat every day. And yes, we can do a discovery form, and we can do a great onboarding call, and we can try to transition as much of that knowledge as we can, but you're the subject matter expert. I think that comes true and holds true in a lot of the more like nuanced B2B parts. Like, we work with companies that are making, the machines that do the automations and things like that. I'm never going to know all that you know about that. And if you're not really willing to commit and work with us on kind of an ongoing basis, our results are going to reflect that, right? And we can still deliver the things, but they're not going to be as efficient and meaningful as if you were involved. And so a lot of people don't ask that up front. And then they kind of get surprised when we're like, hey, we actually need to have 8 meetings with you over the next 2-3 weeks. So that's those two things.
I think that was perfectly said. What is the most expensive lesson you've ever learned?
So I invested in a company several years ago. It was a CBD franchise that I worked for. And I was, I put in 50 grand, right? I opened the bank account for the franchise company and got it off the ground. I sold the first 12, 13 franchises. It's still out there. The person who owns it speaks about business ethics in the cannabis industry. So I learned that an agreement should be called a disagreement. And when you sign an agreement with someone, you really need to make sure you know what happens when things don't go the right way. When you're all in love and you're doing the thing, it doesn't really matter what goes in that contract. What we need to understand is what happens when we don't agree. And I didn't have things in there like, when do distributions occur? What are voting rights? There were just several like things I glossed over in signing that contract that should have been in there but weren't. And so I, basically cost myself $50,000. Like, it's a lesson that I'll never forget. I, take it seriously now when I sign contracts with people for other businesses that I open. And so that was, one that I really learned the hard way. And then I think just too, like, as a service business, like having a rainy day fund. I mean, that's one thing that I've learned and kind of been able to build up over the last couple of years, because people are going to pay late. I had a woman, we built a website, threatened to sue us. We had to pay her back, because we didn't connect her payment portal or something, but she didn't set it up. It's like, but it doesn't matter if I'm right, because, I'm going to have to go get the attorney and pay the fees. So just really having that, 6-month runway of cash for me has been, you sleep better. You can avoid the little, kind of hiccups along the way. You can be prepared for those things that inevitably will come up as a business owner.
Thanks for sharing that. All right. Yeah. Prediction time. Brandon, how might the integration of AI change the way cannabis companies approach marketing?
Yeah, I think it can definitely save, the same way you look at some of these automation technologies in cannabis. It's not that we're trying to take your job, but are humans really put on this earth to organize a spreadsheet? Are they really put on the earth to take notes from a call and put them in nice bullets and put into a follow-up email? Probably not, right? So if you can really leverage that to take out some of the mundane tasks that come with any admin, marketing, sales role, then your human, intellect is freed up to think about things that really move the needle, that really should be empowering to you, that should excite you, right? And I think people get so caught up in what you're taking away from me that they lose sight of what this is actually allowing me to do. And so there's a bit of gatekeeping and some, people will take a familiar pain all day over an unknown pleasure. And they're so used to doing it one way. Like, I own a salon, and one of the first things I did was we fixed the systems. They were still writing things on paper and handing it to the front desk and checking them out. I'm like, what? Like, we're filling out handwritten forms in 2024. And when I tried to take it away, you would have thought like I was taking something from them. But in reality, I was trying to make your life. So I think that's a microcosm of what I see. It's like I think people are so afraid of new things that they're not willing to change, and they're afraid it's going to take their job, because I think that's some of the macro narrative you see kind of portrayed out there on social media.
100%. Kellen?
I mean, I'm going to agree. I think that my take on it is that AI will allow for or eliminate a lot of like the busy work, right? Like to kind of tag along with the example you just did, there's a lot of companies out there that are taking data and manually inputting it into spreadsheets. And then someone has to go through and run the mathematics to do the correlations to then create the dashboard. And then after this whole body of work has been done, then humans can come in and actually look at the information and the actual correlations from the data. And then you can have discussions that are actually meaningful, then actually drive business actions. And so I think AI will just take that whole body of busy work that was at the front end, compress it, make it a lot simpler to get to the actual conversations that matter, that you are making actionable insights from, in my opinion. What do you think, Brian?
I think higher level perspectives. I think it can be used as a tool to help people learn themselves. So instead of Googling certain things, why do I need this or should I do this? They can have a better understanding of here's what's currently going on. I'm trying to understand how to prioritize certain aspects. And then I think it provides a valuable tool to add in with you, Brandon. So that way, instead of having them do all these things, they have a better understanding of what is necessary in order to achieve the efforts. So I think the two of them can work hand in hand. And I think the AI tool, I think what people forget about is that like it can be a tool to educate and to learn, not to replace, to help kind of minimize the learning gap of the unknown territory, which will allow people then to feel more comfortable with things that they're not sure about.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think it's definitely a nice way to learn and explore. And yeah, I agree.
100%. So Brandon, for those who want to get in touch, they're interested in having a fractional marketer, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can email me at brandon@piscapeaksventures.com. Our website is www.piscapeaksventures.com. That's PISGH, peaksventures.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. So Brandon Bobart, that's honestly the best way. I'm on there probably way too much. Drives my wife nuts. What are you doing on that stupid app is what I think she says. But I'm like, baby, I'm trying to put food on the table. But anyway, so I think that's probably the easiest way is find me on LinkedIn and hit me up with a DM, and would love to chat. We do, kind of no risk, quick audits for you. Like we'll do an hour or 2 hours with you, just talk through your problems. Like we want to understand what's going on first. We don't, if I can add value before we talk money and talk retainers, that's my goal. So
awesome. We'll link it on the show notes. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you both. Hope you have a good day.